Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Duncan from Overland Journals, and I hope you guys are all enjoying your stay at homes and keeping those distances and keeping to regulation so we can beat this damn virus. Well, in my previous video, I talked about some new content I had planned for the channel, and one of them is speaking to this person who's a good friend of mine and who's been traveling or going overland in Australia for many, many, many years. Now, apart from my traveling, one of the things I love doing is speaking to those who have got far greater experiences than I have and been to a lot of places, and to listen to their stories. It really intrigues me. So yeah, today is the first part of a series of discussions I'm having with my good friend Terry Clark. Now, Terry's been overlanding in Australia since the early 60s. A time when in Australia finding 4x4s, let alone any other type of vehicle, was hard to come by. And he did this in quite a unique vehicle. And he pretty much went all over Australia at a time when tarred roads or blacktop roads were hard to come by. All there was gravel, what we call bull dust, and corrugated roads. So here we are on the first part, and he's got a unique personal story as well, how he ended up in Australia. So pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited, and I'm excited to share as I go along listening to his story, because I've heard bits and pieces of it, but this is the first time I'll be getting to listen to his entire story. So I'm pretty excited as well, and I'm going to share this with you guys. So let's dive into it right away. So here is Terry Clark. Wait, before we dive into it, I need to mention Terry's been kind enough to share with me authentic footage, film and photos taken from all his trips going way back to the 60s. Terry is even to this day a very keen photographer and loved making films. And back in the day, he filmed using a standard Yashica standard 8mm camera with a wind-up motor. So as we go through this series, you will see footage included, so you get a sense of the idea of kind of traveling he did. So yeah, look out for that, and a big thank you to Terry for that. So now let's get into it and meet up with Terry. Terry, welcome and welcome to my channel, and thank you for taking the time out to have this chat. I'm pretty excited because I have heard your stories, but this is the first time I'll be able to chat in depth and share with my viewers. So now, very briefly, you started going out back back in 61, is that right?
Yeah, I arrived in Australia from England in the November 1959.
Right.
And worked with the Royal Air Force here at the Weapons Research Establishment at Salisbury.
Right. Now that's an interesting story. I want to get down to that. But before that, just a quick teaser for the viewers. So you did this massive trip into the Australian outback when there was no paved roads or anything in a VW Beetle. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I had a 1960 VW Beetle,
Yeah.
which I bought in 1961. And I had a friend who was reasonably adventurous as well, a guy called Nick Ward. He had a 6-month-old Ford Falcon station wagon.
Oh, wow.
It'd only just been released in Australia. They
Right.
were being built by Fords from completely knocked down parts from America.
Yeah.
So we decided that Alice Springs was the epitome of Australia. So let's go there.
So that was you started off from Adelaide to Alice Springs.
I was living in Elizabeth.
Right. Okay. So for our international viewers, to put it in context, how many kilometers of a round trip on gravel roads was that in a Beetle?
In a Beetle. Oh, and work that one out. It wasn't kilometers. It was miles in those days, and it was 1,000 miles to Alice Springs,
and then
and 240 miles out and back to Ayers Rock, and then back to Adelaide. So you do the maths.
Yeah.
about 2,500 miles.
Miles, fantastic. But before we get into the vehicle itself and then the trip and all that, let's have your story is really unique to me. How you ended up in Australia and you've been here pretty much almost ever since.
Yes, I was working in England with the Royal Air Force on guided missiles. Electronics was my trade. I'd done an apprenticeship in airborne wireless and radar, converted and did the Royal Air Force's first guided missile course.
Yep.
It was an air-to-air missile called Fire Streak. It used to fire from a fighter aircraft to another aircraft. And I've been working on that for 3 years in the UK, and they were testing them out here, firing them at Woomera.
Right.
Then we had a few problems out here. Things went wrong, and for reasons unknown to me, they sent me out here to fix the problems. Transport on the way was pretty chaotically organised. They left me in Singapore for 10 days, which wasn't a bad gig back in the 50s in Singapore. And then by the time I arrived, they'd found the problem.
Right. Okay. So that means by the time
I arrived on a Friday, and they said, "There's a comet leaving tomorrow. Do you want to go home?" I said, "No way." I said, "I want to stay." Ended up actually staying 5.5 years.
Whoa.
And we had lots of reasonable pay because of my position. And of course, we had lots of holidays. So we were able to do a lot of touring in the 5.5 years I was here. But the first big trip was this one to Alice Springs. A friend of mine he was a plasterer, Jeff, but he had a Volkswagen. I was so impressed because he used to go roost shooting and rabbit shooting in it. That's the reason I bought one.
Right.
When I went round to show him, he said, "Oh, at last you've got a decent car. We can go to the Birdsville races."
Oh, right.
Well, we never actually got around to going to the Birdsville races, except with another mate in 2007. 46 years later, I went to the Birdsville races.
Oh, well, finally you got it done, so that's good.
And that was in 2007. And as it happened, that was the year of the equine flu.
Ah.
And there were no horses at Birdsville for the races.
Oh, right. Well, at least you had the trip, so that's cool.
Yeah.
but
getting back to the other trip,
yeah.
There was two other couples. There was my wife and our 10-month-old baby.
Yep.
Now, we couldn't leave her behind. And in those days, there weren't any child seats or child restraints or anything.
Yeah.
There were no seat belts. I'd bought actually a single sash seat belt and fitted the front seats of the Volkswagen with it. The Falcon didn't have any seat belts at all.
Right.
And so we set off with a roof rack on the Volkswagen. The Falcon loaded with two couples.
Yep.
And we had a tent. We had a push chair. Had to have a push chair because the baby was only 10 months old. And as you might know, behind the back seat of the Volkswagen, there's a luggage area.
Yep.
Well, we had the bottom of that filled with tin food. On top of the layer of tin food was a 3-inch foam mattress.
Yeah.
On top of that was a 10-month-old baby.
Something you'll never do in this day and age.
And she used to she used to lay sleeping on the foam.
Yeah.
Particularly when we got to rough roads.
Yep.
If things started getting rough, she would just lay down. we didn't instruct her, and she just laid down, automatic survival.
But Terry, just to go a step back, what if you could just touch briefly on what you did in Woomera and what sort of a role that you played, because that's pretty intriguing. I know it's nothing to do with the overlanding side of things, but I quite got intrigued by what you were doing there.
No, I wasn't in Woomera at that time. I
Right.
was at Weapons Research Establishment,
Right.
which was a testing facility at just north of Adelaide in a place called Salisbury.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a big place at the time. It had 3,500 workers
Wow.
testing various missiles and defence equipment and radar, optics. Had about, I think at the time, 3,300 workers and about 6,000 sheep. They ran sheep on the spare ground. And the missiles would arrive from England, and we would set them up, test them, various test facilities, vibration testing, testing the infrared guidance detection system, and then they would be loaded. There was an RAF base, RAF Edinburgh,
Right.
close by,
Okay.
and they would be loaded onto Vampire jets and flown the 500 kilometres to Woomera,
Right.
and then fired at targets in Woomera.
Right.
The target was a jet-propelled drone called Jindavik. Jindavik is Aboriginal for the hunted one.
All right. Okay.
And there are many classic pictures of Firestreak actually going into the jet pipe of the Jindavik.
Oh.
It was that accurate and that good.
Wow. Fantastic.
But when we were testing them in the UK, we would pick up a turboprop aircraft like the Viscount
Yeah.
at about 2,000 yards. But if there was a jet fighter around the place, we'd pick them up at about 10,000 yards because of the extra heat. It was a heat-seeking device
Right. Right.
in the front of the missile.
Yeah.
So they would send the missiles out from the UK. We would set them up, test them, load them onto aircraft, and then they would go to Woomera to be fired.
Right, right. Because I've been to what remains of the Woomera town on the way up to
Yes.
Kubapidi. So that must have been, I mean, today there's hardly anyone occupying the town of Woomera, but it must have been a hype of activity those days.
Oh, it was, yeah. We had. I ended up working there some years later. We had 6,700 people there.
Wow.
It was a fully independent town with its own police stations, hospitals, theatres, 30 or 40 different clubs, tennis, off-road racing.
Oh, really?
go-kart. Yeah, stamp collecting clubs. You name it, clubs. We had clubs. But yes, at that time there was over 6,000 people living there.
Because most of that infrastructure is still there. I mean, when I went there about 2 years ago, it's still intact and pretty well looked after.
That's right. Yeah, in fact, they've just spent $400 million upgrading the range facility with new computers, new radar, new tracking systems.
Right.
And they've just started spending $600 million on the village.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that.
All the infrastructure, the drains and the electricity and the plumbing and that is all being upgraded because they want it to last for another 30 years at least.
Right. And is there anything...
Not with a bigger population.
Right.
Probably maximum 250 people. At the moment, there's about 156, with 11 going to the school, which used to have 1,200.
So is that anything to do with the space program we're starting now?
No, the space program is unlikely to get very involved with Woomera.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's all defence stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and other. It's not only Australian defence, but the Americans use it, the French use it, lots of the British use it.
Yeah.
They've been testing their drone fighters up there. During the Afghan wars, there was lots of places built up there, allied to the Afghan war.
Yeah. Yeah.
A big area which was testing and trying to develop a system for detecting improvised explosive devices.
Right.
roadside bombs.
I understand.
So
Yeah.
they built roads up there
Yeah.
and found ways to detect them. So
Right.
it's still a very busy place, but it's mainly fly in, fly out.
Ah, right. Okay.
There's good accommodation, lots of accommodation.
Because
There's a hotel up there called the Eldo,
yes,
which was the European Launcher Development Organisation that was built. I went through there on my Alice Springs trip in '61, and they were just starting to lay the foundations for Eldo.
oh, right.
All hand, more or less hand mixed concrete for the foundations. They had this great big concrete mixer, and they were literally shoveling sand and concrete and pouring water into these great big things to lay the foundations for those buildings.
Fantastic. Because that's now a part of it is a caravan park, isn't it?
Part of Woomera has a big caravan park,
Yeah.
a very nice caravan
Yeah.
park. It's got chalets as well as caravan parking,
I've
and
stayed there.
also some of the buildings which we used to call the single bedroom buildings
Yeah.
close by. They're still being used by the caravan people.
Yes. Yeah. I stayed there when I went up there 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, it's a nice caravan park. It's got a bar,
Yeah.
which makes caravan parks very sociable.
Yeah.
So we went through Woomera on our way to Alice Springs.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now coming back to your Alice Springs trip,
Yeah,
I just wanted to touch a bit on the vehicle itself.
yeah.
Any particular reason you went for the Beetle? Was there anything else in the market available at that time which is better or not?
No, I went for it purely and simply because my friend had thrashed his across the Donga, shooting kangaroos and rabbits. And and when I bought it, previously I'd had a Vauxhall, a convertible,
Yeah.
and that was just hopeless on rough roads. But his was so impressive that it was in the small car range. It was the only car to buy in Australia at the time.
And I think the drivetrain configuration where the engine sits on the driving wheels, that makes a huge difference off-road.
That's right. Yeah, and it had
Yes.
big wheels, and trailing arm suspension, and the suspension was torsion bar.
Yeah.
So it was, and underneath the vehicle was flat.
Yes,
There was nothing
exactly.
hanging down.
Absolutely.
So there just wasn't anything in Australia to touch it. It won the Round Australia race. The Repco. There was a race at that time every year around Australia.
Yeah.
And, they they won that, I think, about 4 or 5 years in a row.
Yeah. Because I remember back when I was back in Africa, we used to get the BW Beetle chassis, and that was a platform for building off-road racing cars on a budget, and
Yeah,
it worked beautifully. The only thing we would do was take the Beetle motor out and we put in something a little bit more powerful.
yeah.
And talking of motors, what motor did yours have?
Mine had the 1200.
Oh, right.
It was
Okay.
the 1200cc, 4-cylinder, horizontally opposed,
Yeah.
with one carburetor, and the air cleaner. Interestingly enough, the air cleaner was oil filled.
Ah.
And when we did our trip, a tip I picked up from my kangaroo shooting mate was to get the foot of a stocking, lady's stocking,
Yeah.
dip it in oil, and put it over the top of the air cleaner.
Yeah.
That would take the worst of it. But even then, at the end of the day, you would take the stocking off, you'd pull out your air cleaner and dig out the mud that was in the bottom of the air, in amongst the oil of the air cleaner. So we used
Fantastic.
to do that on a daily basis
Now,
because of one of the disadvantages of it, of course, was the wheels at the back were kicking up the dust,
I can imagine.
and it was being sucked in by the air cleaner.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you must have done a whole lot of bush mechanic work on this trip because there was hardly any places you could find service stations or servos and so
Oh,
on.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. There was on the way back In fact, we ran out of tyres on the Beetle.
Yeah, okay, hold it there, Terry, because I'm gonna get down to some of those interesting stories down the track on this
Right.
series. But look, it's very, very, very interesting, and I'm enjoying myself. Now, what I wanted to do also was get into the vehicle itself and how do you
Right.
prep it for this trip. But I'm going to hold that for the next part when it comes out. So for those of you who are watching, make sure you watch out for the next part where Terry is going to talk about the vehicle itself, how he prepped it, and what gear he took along. So Terry, I'll see you on the next episode when we talk about your vehicle.
Right. I look forward to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. But make sure you catch up on the next one. It's going to be very exciting. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel already, please do subscribe. My channel is all about bringing through, all my experiences in overlanding, as well as other stories like Terry's. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon in the next episode, which will come out in next week.